Hello, and welcome to Breast Cancer Conversations, a podcast brought to you by survivingbreastcancer.org. I am Laura Carfing, breast cancer survivor and founder of survivingbreastcancer.org, a nonprofit organization providing community, education, and resources to empower those diagnosed with breast cancer and their caregivers from day one and beyond. Hello, my friends. One of the things that we want to do here at survivingbreastcancer.org and on the podcast Breast Cancer Conversations is to continually provide you with information, inspiration, and resources. So today I am so pleased to bring Maya Said onto the podcast. Maya spent 15 years working in healthcare, primarily in the pharmaceutical industry, with a focus on increasing innovation and access. Despite her extensive experience with healthcare systems globally, it wasn't until she first became a patient herself that she realized that much more can be done to improve outcomes and better serve the needs of patients. An engineer and scientist by training, she strongly believes that technology combined with early patient input can address many of the gaps patients experience in navigating the healthcare system. Her conviction that technology-based solutions that empower patients can lead to better outcomes led her to create Outcomes for Me.
So we're not interested in averages. It's personal. It's one person, and we want to be relevant to that person.
Welcome to the conversation.
My name is Maya Said. I'm founder CEO of Outcomes for Me. I'm an engineer scientist by training. That's where I started, my education, my career. But then very rapidly ended up spending the last 15 years or so before starting Outcomes for Me in the pharmaceutical industry. And mainly in charge of either partnering with biotech and tech companies, or most recently, I was leading global market access, pricing, and reimbursement of cancer drugs at Novartis. And, throughout my career before starting Outcomes for Me, I've been, really passionate about science, innovation, and bringing it to patients, really doing a change and accelerating curing disease. And I think one of the reasons for starting Outcomes for Me was the realization, and we can go into that if you want, but the realization that ultimately science for the sake of science is not what we want. We want science to really have an impact, to help us, cure disease. But to do that, you need innovation, you need access,
Yes.
and then you need actually people to be able to get to the treatment and know about them, which is the reason we created Outcomes for Me, and which is a direct-to-patient platform to help patients navigate through their care, empowering them with the information they need to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that's so much of the synergy that we both bring to our breast cancer communities. And we can get into that a little bit more as well. And so coming from the pharmaceutical background and the corporate side, you really have an understanding, a deep understanding for what the ins and outs are for the therapeutics, the drugs, the patients, the financial burdens that people experience going through cancer. So tell me how that helped inform some of your initial ideas of starting Outcomes for Me.
Yeah, so first of all, coming from the pharmaceutical side, you're essentially embedded in innovation, right? Biotech innovation, pharma innovation, and the part that's really exciting about cancer, as you know, and breast cancer in particular, but it's all cancers, is there's been a lot of science and evolution in the past 20 years. I mean, 20 years ago, when Herceptin was approved for breast cancer, it was the only targeted drug. HER2 was not a thing until Herceptin was approved, right? And now, 20 years later or so, there's a lot of approaches that are really helping us not yet cure cancer, but really fight it. And then, so you see all that potential around, where the innovation and how it's accelerating. And then it's kind of, this opportunity of, well, how do we make sure that wherever people are, they have access to that, right? That's the challenge. So the exciting news, at least, what is really exciting about innovation and bio-innovation is we understand more and better how to target and address some of, the cancers. And also we understand better how cancer progresses. We don't understand it fully, obviously, but we do know much more now and have more tools than 10, 20 years ago, even than a year ago.
Even than a year
Um,
ago, absolutely.
Over the year ago. I mean, one of the things, as you probably know, one of the thing we do on the platform is we have integrated the NCCN clinical guidelines, which essentially means that, I think you're familiar with the NCCN guidelines. It's, the organization of the leading cancer centers in the world that come together to issue the guidelines around treatments.
Hmm.
And we personalize them and we provide, we make them patient facing. We're the only organization that has done that. But just talking about last year alone, the guidelines have updated over 7 times last year.
Wow.
And what triggers updates in the guidelines is essentially a change in treatments that could improve patients, and hence that changes that.
That's amazing. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. Do you have an example of what one of those 7 changes
Yeah,
have
I mean,
been?
I'll give you the latest, which was a few
Yes.
weeks ago. Actually, at the ASCO, I was there this year at the ASCO.
Oh, I wish I
ASCO,
had known. So were we.
oh, was there? Oh, we missed each other. So were you at the plenary session?
Yes.
Did you see
The
the plenary
standing
session?
ovation with the low
Yes,
HER2. Absolutely.
yes. And so maybe just for the audience, right? Like
Hmm.
so at ASCO this year, there was at the plenary session, AstraZeneca revealed the latest results from a clinical trial on Enhertu in HER2 low patients, and the impact so first of all, the results were incredible, right? Like you saw a standing ovation that only happens once in a lifetime, I think,
Totally.
in terms of
Totally.
just the impact, how impressive the clinical results were for that population. And also, we all know that HER2 low essentially is today classified as HER2 negative, is treated as HER2 negative. And there's a lot of unmet need. That there's a lot of, metastatic triple negative breast cancer, for example, is very difficult to treat. So you see that
Hmm.
and you see this huge opportunity.
Hmm.
2 weeks later, the NCCN guidelines updated. In fact, the FDA approved it just a few weeks ago, or I
Okay.
think what last week. But 2 weeks after ASCO, the NCCN updated. I think it's the fastest
Wow.
NCCN update in the history of the NCCN. That day, 2 days later, we updated, we integrated the update, and we proactively send notifications and emails to everybody using our platform. That's the power of that.
That's
And that's an
amazing.
example of this.
I love that. And, I think that's one of the great things of why I love ASCO and a lot of these symposiums and conferences is because, and what you're doing is taking this information, taking the research, putting it in relatable terms, sending it and blasting it out to your community, and really being able to see the translation into clinical practice immediately. And so I
Right.
think that is what is so exciting when you talk about innovation and what we're seeing in biotech innovation is really this, translation of information across platforms, across people, across disparities and access and everything. So that's really wonderful.
Right. And the other thing, I mean, another thing, just going back to the innovation side and how can you bring it as quickly as possible to people that need it? As I'm sure you're aware, like in cancer in particular, clinical trials is often one of the best treatment options. But most people are not aware of that. Most people don't even realize. I mean, COVID to some extent educated all of us, kind of made us more aware of the importance of clinical trials and how they work. But in cancer, for example, there's a lot of misconception around how clinical trials are run. There's never against placebo, it's always against standard of care. And so even some people, advocates, are aware of that, but the majority of the population, 80%, 85% of patients, are not aware that clinical trial is sometimes their best treatment options. And then clinical trial rapidly evolve and rapidly change, and there's no way today to easily get access to to find the clinical trials. In fact, we even know that providers, we were working with Mass General here in Boston to help them much more quicker find, match their own patients to their clinical trials. And so that's another example where we also partner with innovation companies and the providers to really help patients immediately kind of find out what are their options, and if they're a potential match to a clinical trial, and to help them have that conversation with their provider around that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's linger on that topic a little bit because I know clinical trials is something that I'm also incredibly passionate about because we know the value that it brings, not just to the science, but to the patients and the patients that come after those people as well. So I think one of the like myth busters or misconceptions that I think we adhere to, at least I know I fell into this category, was thinking that, clinical trials were only available to me at my final last resort. And now we're learning, actually, this could actually be a really great second line or third line treatment for somebody, depending on what type of their characteristics of their tumor cells are, right? So,
Yeah, or even, I mean, first line. I had a friend of
okay.
mine here in Boston. It's been a year and a half ago, get diagnosed with breast cancer, and she's a scientist by training. Actually, she did a lot of research in oncology, and it's a relatively early stage breast cancer that she was diagnosed with, and she was being treated at Mass General,
Okay.
but she sought a clinical trial, and she took it. So that clinical trial that she ended up being on was a clinical trial that started in the neoadjuvant setting. So even before any treatment, that was the only way to be able to enter it. And she's doing well now. But just to give you an example, it's not only second line or third line; it could be first line. It depends, and that's also where this rapid innovation, because it used to be, as you say, it used to be that we do third line, fourth line, because essentially kind of that's where you want to see if these actually work or not. But then progressively, there's a lot of clinical trials where you know the drug may be already approved in a later line, and it's starting going earlier because the science potentially to be proven via the clinical trial could indicate that if you intervene earlier, then you get even better efficacy.
What was it recently? Was it Verzenio that I think recently transitioned from just being, for a
Yes.
metastatic now to earlier stage and showing
Yeah.
positive outcomes in that setting as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Even talking to my
Yeah. That's amazing.
oncologist,
Yeah. Exactly.
we were talking, and I was diagnosed about 5 years ago, and she was like, Laura, the treatment that you were on, like, we don't even prescribe that anymore. Like, it's no longer the standard. And I'm like, in just 5 years. So when you're talking about this innovation, 2 decades ago, like it's really cutting edge year by year, month by month with everything coming out. And I'm also getting, the goosebumps in the good sense that science has evolved so rapidly that innovation is happening at warp speed that we need to get the standard of care up to speed with a lot of the information that we have going out there. I know there's a lot of new diagnostics that are being made available, new treatments that are becoming online. And so when you talk about empowering the patient, we're coming to the doctors now with our printouts and our phones with all of the peer-reviewed journals and articles of saying, well, what about this? Have we thought about this? And so I love that you've created this platform and this app, which I want to talk more about, that kind of puts that at the fingertips of the patient, correct?
Exactly, because like the challenge with and the opportunity, obviously, with where how rapidly science is evolving, is it's very difficult for oncologists to keep up. I mean, you and I sit here in Boston, right? Like, and essentially, we are fortunate enough to have access to all these specialty care locations, Dana Farber Cancer Center, Mass General, etc. But which all have breast cancer specialists, right? But the majority of treatment of cancer is via a general oncologist. And the challenge for a general oncologist, we talk to providers all the time. We want to enhance that conversation, help them also, help their patients, right? And the challenge for a general oncologist is, how do you keep up with all the cancers? How do you keep up? Like when the guidelines update so often, how do you keep up? And in the world of, which is where also cancer innovation is evolving, targeted care, right? Like it's kind of, we just took the example of HER2 low, right? So then you need to have the HER2 status, but then it's also the HER2 low status. So if you think about like a general oncologist who is not seeing only breast cancer patients, is seeing all kinds of cancers, but then how often do they see a triple negative breast cancer patients that now is a HER2 patients? It's less often, which makes it even more challenging. for the oncologist to stay up to date. So then you look at it and you say, okay, the oncologists want to help, and we work with oncologists, but the oncologist wants to help their patients, but also let's help the patient also in that shared decision making. Like, let's give them the tools to have that conversation.
Maya, I want to talk about your platform and the app outcomes for me. Tell me a little bit about the background and the vision that you have for this.
I told you why, coming from the innovation side and the pharma side, the opportunity, but it was also a personal experience that led me to start it, where I actually didn't end up having being diagnosed with cancer, but I ended up becoming a patient for the first time in my life,
Mm.
which was one of the triggers for me starting the company, because in that experience, it ended up being a benign mass. Um, I became a patient, and for the first time, I needed surgery, etc. And but the experience was super overwhelming to me, and I didn't go through cancer.
Mm.
And I googled, and I'm a scientist. I googled, and then it got very overwhelming very fast. It's like, okay, is this? Is it this? And
Yeah.
really, at some point, I thought, I could die tomorrow. Or this is nothing. Which one is it? Right? Like it's
The
um
anxiety, the stress,
right.
absolutely.
And the entire experience, just navigating it, was not only stressful, overwhelming. I just couldn't sort it out. Right. So what we have built is essentially the best way to think about it is we call it a patient empowerment platform, but it's really personalized evidence-based navigation, right? And so it's all about personalization. So it has to be relevant specifically to me as a patient. Otherwise, I can't do anything with it, right? Otherwise, it's overwhelming. Like, I don't know if this is relevant to me or not. I don't know. How do I know if this is relevant to me today, tomorrow, or in a week? So that's kind of why the experience on our app and the platform has a lot of features in it, because it's all about personalizing the experience and helping people that are diagnosed with breast cancer to navigate through their care and giving them the information they need when they need
That pertains to them in their
it.
particular
Exactly.
situation.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So So when people download the app, and the app is free, by the way, I should just
Oh,
say it.
great.
If people, I know you know that, but like for the whole service is free. So when people download the app, essentially, it has a lot of resources in it. But then do we want to give the power, to the patient, right? So the app can personalize a lot. It's up to the patient to decide how much it wants it to personalize. So if the patient has the option to um, the app asks question, because we need to understand the diagnosis. So breast cancer, right? We need to understand if it's HER2 positive, you know, hormone positive or negative. There's a number of things that are important for us to be able to personalize and all this is done automatically. But another option is, so either we can ask questions, we keep them simple because most people don't know the answers to those questions if we get very complicated. But then also patients could authorize us to retrieve the medical records so that the app can personalize based on the entire medical record.
Oh, okay.
And so when the app personalizes, so to take the example of clinical trials, the first thing it does is it automatically shows what are all the clinical trials that are a potential match based on the personalization. And the more the app is personalized, the better, the better the matching. That matching is a live feed from clinicaltrials.gov, so it's the latest information. So that's kind of one of the features. Then what we do, and actually we launched this. What's today? Friday. We launched it on Tuesday. So beyond that, every now and then we're trying to do a lot of partnerships so that we can also help people access specific clinical trials. So we also we launched 3 days ago. We're trying to help accelerate the recruitment of 3 trials. So we proactively reach out if patients, have enabled notification. You may be a potential to a trial. Would you like to kind of take a look? And so if people say yes, then they ask a few questions. We answer a few questions we have, and then they get on a call with one of our nurse practitioners, so
Wonderful.
that, because at the end it's also, you need that
Yeah.
personalized experience, right, to answer their questions, to also see if they're a potential match, and from there, if they choose to, if they want to, we can refer them directly to the trial site. For any trial they see on the app also provides, it's all about personalization. So it also provides the center of that trial that are closest to your location and facilitate the contact. At any point, a person could ask a question on our platform, and we have a nurse practitioner team that answers the question. So it's a mix of automatic technology,
Yeah.
but also we have resources available to get on the call or answer via email questions to help people really have everything they need to really get the best care they deserve.
I love that. I love that. And it sounds like you have this, good balance between leveraging technology, artificial intelligence, having the questions not be so overwhelming, and then having that human personalized touch as well. So, I think so many times we're seeing now, even on ads, you're like, talk to a live human because we were so tired of the technology, right? And so to
Exactly.
really have that balance, and you're absolutely right. So that way, I could see using myself as an example. It's like you get so far, you're like, okay, here's the trial or here's information for me, but now what do I do? Like, so I think having that nurse practitioner to be able to either answer emails or talk to me through, next steps or what I could expect is super helpful and very patient focused and patient centered, which is what you guys are doing, which I really appreciate. So you also have all of these like news feeds and other like information that people can access as well. Is that something, again, when we download the app, something that we're able to customize as well in terms of what information is showing up on our feed for our particular diagnosis?
Yeah, the app has different models. So think about it as the patient journey, right? Like, or as patient navigator. The problem of all of us as patients in this healthcare system is we experience the disease, we live with it continuously, right? But the healthcare system is set up so that we can only interact with it on episode by episode basis, right? Like I go see a doctor, I call a nurse, I schedule it. So it's like it's this chunk of interaction. And so what happens in between? We have no support. What happens if we wake up at 2 a.m. and kind of we can't sleep and we want to like have that? That's not available to us. So what we're really trying to build and have built is really kind of that continuous navigation throughout the care journey. So let me walk you through an example. A person gets diagnosed with breast cancer, right, and downloads the app. And the first thing is, so we ask, are you just diagnosed, in treatment, or in remission? So if it's just diagnosed, the first thing, the resources would get personalized around, okay, here are things, what to expect. Maybe we to understand, ask questions. Like we get a lot of people that, well, that's when they ask questions, like, I just got this, what do I need to prepare to have the next visit? Are the questions I need to have, etc. Then, let's say there's the definitive diagnosis and, we know the biopsy, etc. Then if we have all that information, whether they're self-entered or we get them from the medical record, the app personalizes and provide all the treatment options, all the way up to drug levels. Now, when we talk about treatment options, we just talked about clinical trials. Obviously, that's a set of treatment options that are very important to understand. But it's also all the approved treatments. And this is where, we have integrated the NCCN clinical guidelines and made them patient-facing. When I say NCCN clinical guidelines, essentially it's the guidelines issued to physicians, not the patient guidelines that they have, the one issued to physicians. And we made them patient-facing. And so people can look at specific drug, all of them, and read about them, and also kind of questions to ask their providers. So that's another aspect. Now, at some point somebody gets on the treatment, maybe start experiencing symptoms. So we have symptom tracker, we have symptom management information, we have medication tracking. To your point, the news and the resources, right? So all the news that's kind of personalized. Again, the more the app knows, the more it gets personalized. What's also very, very important is it goes back to kind of, like that big realization after having spent 15, 20 years of my life in healthcare and thinking that I was patient focused, because obviously, that's, I mean, I really believed I was patient focused, but then I became a patient and I realized I have no idea what a patient is, right? And the same thing, I have not gone through breast cancer, so I don't know what that is. So, and that's something that's important to all of us at Outcomes for Me, is we continue to develop all the time the platform. We get a lot of feedback from people that use it. So, you know, every now and then we have a journaling, for example, in the app. This is something that we didn't set out to build. This is something that we had patients that use the platform. They say, okay, it's great, but I would love to have a place where I can keep my journal. So we built it. That's an example of that. That's why it keeps on evolving.
Yeah, and I love that, right? And I feel the same way. People are like, "How do you come up with your topics for your blogs or this?" I'm like, basically my inbox. The people that have the questions mean that they want the information, and that helps inform, the services and programs that we provide, right? And so I love that you're constantly in this feedback loop and knowing that it will evolve. And I think that's the beauty of technology and the beauty of science and the work that we're doing is that we have this, flexibility and fluidness with the work that we're doing. And so, yeah, just like the personalization, the more information that we can learn, the better it's going to be. So that's
Right.
wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what is in the future for Outcomes for Me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is so actually, I was about to. So today, that's kind of, I just, the platform is very focused on helping patients that are just diagnosed in treatment, manage their care, and also take a proactive approach about them. What's coming in the future, we've gotten a lot of feedback around, facilitating connections to patients and, like specific connections. So we're developing that on the community side. There's a lot of, so we address a lot of questions that have to do with cost, but on the one, like if we get asked, our team helps. But that's another thing that we want to also help with is I hear you probably have but getting cancer beyond the devastation of the disease itself, there's the devastation around, kind of how do you manage all these costs, right? And so we want to be able to add that to our platform. That right now it's not there. We want to be able to add that. So kind of, looking at a lot of feedback on that. But it's really around this in the future of outcomes to me, there's two areas. One is, like continuing to add more on the platform to help patients. And this is why the more people give us feedback, we implement everything. And then the second, as I mentioned today, we're live in breast cancer across the world. And I mean, I know your audience is breast cancer, but also we're developing for the other cancers. So we'll be launching lung later this year and more cancers. We have a big focus on equity. So our goal is to really democratize healthcare. That's why we go direct to consumer. That's why I mentioned also the access piece that we want to do. So that's one thing that we're spending a lot of time on now. We need to make sure that everybody has access. At some point, I heard, actually, I think you had on one of your podcasts with Abigail, a caregiver, right? You had a
Oh,
podcast on
yes,
caregiver. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah. And then at some point we want to help add an experience for caregivers to help them, right? And to help
absolutely.
them help it. So there's a lot of things, obviously, I mean, like you, Laura,
Yeah.
it's like we can't do everything, but
Ah, I
like
know.
we're growing. When we met first,
I
we
know.
had we were launching. We had like zero patients, or we were just starting. Now
Yeah.
we have over 70,000 breast
Holy
cancer patients
cow.
on the
That's
platform. Yeah,
incredible. Wow.
yeah.
That's amazing. And what exponential growth. And I know you're helping so many women and men who have been diagnosed with breast cancer. And hopefully to be able to scale that to all cancers, I think is just really amazing. You and I have the lucky problem of too many ideas, right? And, we're the same way. I have my dinner conversations with William, and all we do is talk about SBC and what we want to do next. And you're absolutely right. There's this build between, the science and the evidence base, and then the community and the peer-to-peer support and the mental health, but the emotional well-being, how it all kind of is interconnected, and really taking those like building blocks to create this platform for people where they can get that information and knowing that more is on the horizon, I think is outstanding. So,
Yeah.
speaking of caregivers, we were talking about caregivers, and that's one thing, with this overarching umbrella where cancer doesn't just affect the patient, but affects everybody around them, the caregivers, the families, the children, the neighbors. And so really helping that population understand how they can be empowered and best support those diagnosed. So yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So
So that's on the midterm horizon, but that's something that we're
yeah.
very aware of and we want to really help with. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So how can people get a hold of Outcomes for Me? Is it just like the website outcomesforme.com?
Yeah, so it's for me.com. It's also, it's an app. So it's both an app and a website. On
Okay.
the app is on the, App Store and the Play Store, Outcomes for Me.
Yep.
If you type Outcomes for
And
Me,
it's with the
the
number
number four,
four,
right?
right?
The
The number
number
four.
four. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Outcomes, the number four, ME.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. And again, would encourage everybody that is looking for these resources to try it out, to give us feedback if you're looking for something you
Yeah.
don't see it. You can, in the app there's an ask, and that ask could
Oh,
also be around feedback. So
yeah.
surely, yeah.
So you just make it so easy for everybody, which is
Yeah, I mean,
wonderful.
that's the goal, right?
Cancer is
That's
hard
the
enough.
goal. That's the goal. Like that's kind of, I mean, I was telling the team the other day, it's like I wake up every day and it's like, I'm sure you have a similar feeling. And, it's crazy. We have a lot of things to do, but I know why I'm doing this.
Yes, exactly.
And the reason we're doing this is today in healthcare, patients still don't have power.
Yeah.
And we want to give them the power. And to give them the power, it's about giving them the tools that
Mm-hmm.
help them have a real voice and a real decision making in the
Yeah.
conversation with the providers and their care. And ultimately, I mean, you know this, you've done it. It's kind of like it's taking things in your hand and trying to get the resources you need. It's a very difficult thing to go through,
Oh, it's
and
so
we want
hard.
to kind of you know use technology and people, as you
Mm-hmm.
said, it's a hybrid, to help people really kind of get to
Yeah.
help them, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think that could be overstated. Even in our line of work, right? We're here in the business of empowering and providing education. And I had an experience recently. I'm in my blue Johnny at the hospital, sitting on the bed, and I was like, okay, I'm going to ask my question. I'm empowered. I know the information. Um, I got my response was like, no, not available. And I was like, oh, okay. Let me just get back dressed and get my clothes back on and leave. And I'm like, what is wrong with me, Laura? Because, we know when you get a no to keep probing and keep asking questions, or maybe there's another modality or another type of screening, but you're half naked, you're uncomfortable, just physically, you're like on a bed, you're not standing, you're not like, I was just like,
Yeah,
okay, let me just go back home and run out of here as fast as possible because it's embarrassing. And,
yeah,
we try and say, we want to be empowered, but I just want people to know too, it's, we don't have all the answers either. And it's not always as easy as we make it sound, right? With just your questions to ask, or even some people too, who really teeter that line of, I don't want my nurse navigator or nurse or oncologist to be mad at me, right? Like, am I asking too much? And so
yeah,
what is the etiquette around, developing that relationship so it really is a two-way partnership?
yeah, yeah. And also every person is different,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is where personalization and kind of adapting. Every person situation is different, disease is different, preferences are different. So it's
Yeah.
also kind of bit tuning to that, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the preferences for sure. Absolutely.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Maya, this has been an outstanding conversation. Are there topics that we haven't covered?
We've covered it, but we mentioned it, but I want to emphasize it. It's especially breast cancer, because we're talking about breast cancer. Like, science is advancing rapidly,
Yes.
and I think any stage, anything, right? So it's and sometimes, yes, we don't have a cure yet, but the science is rapidly evolving, that it's all about kind of bridging until we get to the cure. And I
Yes.
think, I mean, if there's one message I want to just leave with, is it's exciting to be living in this environment where the science is so rapidly evolving. Like
Yeah.
I truly believe that in our lifetime, there we will be able to essentially treat fully cancer, cure it. I really believe so. And I think what's going to accelerate this, I really think so. And that's kind of, also the vision behind the outcomes for me is the more we can accelerate not only the dissemination of innovation, but the understanding at scale of how these treatments, how people respond to these treatments, right? Because that's another thing we didn't cover, right? It's when you do a clinical trial and then the drug gets approved or the treatment gets approved, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that many patients that have taken it. And so you really to understand how in the real world people it impacts them, how to best manage it, how to best manage the symptoms around it. That's very powerful, and we want to be the platform to help people share that so that we can share it back. Right? That's why it's called outcomes for me. It's about you. It's about the person using the platform. And we kind of talk about it all the time within the company. We want to help people one life at a time, right? We're not interested in averages. It's personal. It's one person, and we want to be relevant to that person. And so, a cancer diagnosis is never good news, but given the diagnosis, things are rapidly evolving. So I think there's a lot of hope.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. There's definitely, yeah, to end on the hope note. I love that. Maya, this has been a true pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you.
being here. And thank you all for listening and tuning in week after week here on Breast Cancer Conversations. Please be mindful that all of our content and information is for educational purposes only and is never a substitute for medical advice. If you want to hang out, again, please check out survivingbreastcancer.org/events, where you can RSVP to our Thursday Night Thrivers weekly meetup, our Movement Monday classes, workshops, seminars, and so much more. We can also continue the dialogue online via social media. Our Instagram handle is survivingbreastcancer.org, all one word, and you can follow us on Twitter at SBC_ORG. Until next time, keep on thriving.